G'day gorgeous people and welcome back to Politics Made OK. Before we kick off, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss a single second of, well, all of this. So do you notice anything different about me? Anything at all that just catches your eye? Why yes, thank you for noticing this bit of DIY colour in the otherwise grey bleakness that is Canberra, since we've learnt we're going to be locked down for another month. Yep, everything's fine. It does mean I haven't been able to get out and about as much as I usually would, but even so, these very watchful, if not very heavy eyes have been looking closely at what's been going on in this week of politics. While I and millions of you out there are in lockdown, a bunch of our politicians are actually overseas or about to be in diplomatic missions. And, you know, I'm not jealous at all. Not at all. Before Scott Morrison even boarded a plane to the US though, he announced this once in a lifetime international defence deal. And it's got something to do with nuclear power. There's also been a lot of focus on what life is going to look like after the pandemic up here on the Hill, with questions about how proof of vaccination is going to work, what's going to happen if you're not vaccinated, and home quarantine. So without further ado, let's get cracking on this week's episode of Politics Made OK. Yeah. You like that noise? Neither do I. It's the clickety-clacketing of my nightmare. And that nightmare is spending 24 hours a day with me, myself, and I. Yep, I'm coping real well with this lockdown. The clickety-clacketing of these bad boys on the keys was worth it though, to see something unfold on the internet which I just have to bring you immediately. It all starts with this thing called the Met Gala. Heard of it? Aside from just the incredible outfits and very dramatic entrances, there was something about this event that just made my week. And that something is Nicki Minaj. Minaj basically said, look, I'm not going to go to the Met Gala because it requires a COVID vaccination, and I don't want to get one of those. And her reason why? Well, because in her words, my cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen, his friend was weeks away from getting married, now the girl called off the wedding, so just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bullied. There is so much I could say about this. But before I could, New South Wales Health beat me to it. That's right, the Department of Health in New South Wales clapped back at Nicki Minaj. It tweeted that we promise to leave the rapping to Nicki Minaj if she leaves medicine to doctors and scientists. I never would have thought I'd say this, but oh my god, I love New South Wales Health. Australian breakfast TV shows just could not handle this the next morning. It was as funny as it was cringe to try to watch them retell this story as professionals.
I feel really sorry for the friend's cousin in Trinidad who clearly has swollen balls and has a cancelled wedding, and it has nothing to do with COVID. Poor fella.
I'm uncomfortable with you using the term balls. Coming out of your mouth,
I'm thinking of the shallow...
The word coming out of her mouth. Oh, come on.
I'm uncomfortable with the word swollen.
You gotta admit, it's pretty hard to handle this story about balls. Don't get me wrong, the Minaj stunt is hilarious. But it does speak to this wider issue of misinformation and vaccine hesitancy. Our friends Craig Kelly and Clive Palmer were in the news again this week. This is like the 4th episode where I'm talking about these guys, right? Am I secretly obsessed with the United Australia Party? That said, there is actually a good reason we're talking about them this week. And that is that they were brought into line by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. Yeah, the TGA lawyers wrote to Craig Kelly and the UAP being like, yeah, you gotta stop misleading people with those unsolicited text messages or we'll, take you to court. So what was the UAP saying that was misleading? Well, that almost 500 people had died from the vaccine, which is just blatantly false. There's been 10 or so deaths that have been linked to this really rare blood clotting event. And yeah, the TGA has investigated hundreds of other deaths, but none of them are directly linked to the vaccine. It just happens that someone's had the jab and then, well, died. Because as people, we we tend to do that. Even so, Craig Kelly and Clive Palmer are out there spreading all this misinformation and even saying they'd welcome this legal challenge. Good luck, boys. While there's a really vocal minority pushing anti-vax views, there's also been movement on the other side of the spectrum this week. That is, that venues are starting to float the idea of making the vaccine mandatory for not just staff, but patrons. Crown Casino came out this week and said that, yeah, they were really considering whether to make the jab mandatory for their staff and for it to be a precondition if you ever want to stay at any of their hotels. The question is, can they do that? Well, the Prime Minister says, yeah, they can. In an interview last week, he said any venue, any pub, any cafe, any restaurant, any shop has every right under Australia's property laws to be able to deny entry to people who are unvaccinated. Okay then, but how would a pub or venue or whatever absolutely know whether you're vaccinated or not? Well, the Prime Minister covered off on that one too. He said the QR code readers that the states have, they need to work to be able to show whether someone has been vaccinated or not. So, you know, whenever you go into a venue, like a cafe or a bar, you have to check in with your phone? Well, the plan is for that same technology to be used to identify whether you've had the jab or not. And yet, according to the PM, every venue has the absolute right to deny anyone who's not vaccinated. If we're honest, this isn't a huge surprise. If you look at the national plan, it makes clear that the government wants to ease restrictions on vaccinated residents after 70% of the population is immunised. And a little update on our progress. 70% of eligible Australians have now had their first dose of a COVID vaccine. And you know how those vaccines work, right? You've got to get that second dose within a couple of months. So that means that, yeah, in 8 weeks' time or so, we'll have 70% of the population vaccinated. And that brings us closer to, this little small thing that we're kind of talking about. The international borders being reopened! Sorry. While we're all sitting here, daydreaming about it, and screaming into cameras about it, the PM, Defence Minister and Foreign Minister have been on, are on, or about to be on international trips. That's right, Foreign Minister Maurice Payne and Defence Minister Peter Dutton are in the US right now, and Scott Morrison is set to join them next Tuesday. This is a really big deal, because Morrison and Biden have only had 2 one-on-one phone calls since Biden came to power. Yeah, it's prompted a lot of questions about if Biden really likes Morrison. If you remember from a couple of weeks ago, I compared this relationship and a couple of others to the group in Mean Girls. God, I'm smart. In that little metaphor, the US is Regina George and Australia is Gretchen Wieners. Yep, always under America's thumb. Well, on September 24, this thing called the Quad will be meeting. That includes 4 countries: Australia, the US, India, and Japan. I mean, if I wanted to, I could really assign each country a character in Mean Girls. But I wouldn't want to, fan any diplomatic tensions or be responsible for, an international burn book. Just an idea. But before Morrison even met with Biden in the US, something huge happened. We went nuclear. Nuclear. Can I say nuclear? And by that, I mean we signed on to an agreement with the US and the UK to get nuclear submarines for the first time, ever. The signing of this deal created a new partnership between the countries called AUKUS. No, not AUKUS. Another fun acronym, AUKUS. As in Australia, the UK, and the US. Clever, right? Anyway, Morrison was real clear that this does not mean we're getting nuclear weapons. It just means we're going to get a different kind of submarine that's faster, quieter, just better. And he said it was a really big moment for Australia and its partners.
A new agreement that I describe as a forever partnership.
Ah, the forever partnership. I feel like that calls for some kind of BFF bracelet, right? Despite this supposedly really close relationship, something pretty awkward happened in the joint press conference between the leaders.
And I want to thank that fellow down under. Thank you very much, pal. Appreciate it, Mr. Prime Minister.
Did you catch it? I mean, it just raised the question, did the US president just forget Scott Morrison's name? I love it so much, because you've got Scott Morrison who's thank you, Joe, the US is our closest strategic partner. And then you've got Joe Biden cheers, old mate. I want to say Sam? Stewart. Steve. It's Steve. Oh, who could have thought that once-in-a-lifetime international defence agreements that really signal the build-up of militarisation in the region and potential war could be so funny. I'm so excited to bring you what happens when Biden and Morrison actually meet in person next week. There's going to be so many insane announcements and a lot of really important questions, including, of course, will the US President remember the Australian Prime Minister's name? Until then, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week on Politics Made OK.